Alright folks, this is the finale of it coming up. This is part 3 of What You Thinking. Well, Hired dropped all the cards in the mail slot at the station and then heard the whistle a-blowing and the conductor hollered, "All aboard!" It's the 11th stop, San Francisco, California. Whilst they was a-riding to San Francisco, Jesse about balled up on Walter and Hired. He said, "Now you got us in a pickle. I gotta stop everything and make that darn new perfume. Now you boys is going to have to help me, because this ain't going to be no easy undertaking, seeing as how it ain't never been done before, you know. I got some ideas, but that was all they was, ideas." Now Hired and Walter had done stepped off in it. Hired just grinned and told Jesse he worked well under pressure and he needed the challenge. Well, old Jesse about popped his in court. They all piled on Jesse after Jesse done got on to Hired. Thing of it was, Buster was on top and he was the biggest of them all. Both Hired and Jesse was a-hollering that Buster was a-squashing them. Well, after they all unpiled, they all busted out laughing, and Hired didn't usually get into messing or speak out of turn like he done, but they all bet their bottom dollar there had to be a reason for it. Reckon they found out what that was real quick when they asked Hired why he done like he done. Well, sir, first off, it made good business sense to bring it up in that kind of group. Advance and free publicity was going to make the company lots of money. Them movie stars would do the promoting for free, especially with them getting some for free and it being limited. Next off, Hired said he needed something special for a special occasion. Walter asked him what was that. Hired said for a wedding gift. "For who?" asked Jesse. "Me and Alma May," said Hired. "We's getting hitched." "Well, when did this all come about?" asked the boys. Well, Hired said next June they was going to get hitched as Alma May was leaving home. She was near about 19 and Hired was 21 next summer and was the ideal time for them. Well, the boys was the first to know, and Hired wanted all three of them to be his best men. Old trickster Walter said no wonder Hired was a-hiding out in the gents when that gal latched onto him there in New Orleans. Well, the boys just howled over that one. Now that Walter was a mess for sure and is to this day. The boys had a Pullman sleeping car and was on the train overnight. Walter done short-sheeted Buster's bunk, but he didn't know him and Hired done switched. Hired went to get into bed and the boy barely got up to his knees before he found out he couldn't get into bed. Short-sheeted he was. Walter was just a-busting out laughing. Buster had a good night's sleep though. The boys pulled in just after sunup and got ready to get off of the train. Buster had the Fairmont Hotel booked for them and a car awaiting too. None of the boys knowed nary a soul in San Francisco, but it wasn't going to stop them from getting round at all. They was all ready for the sights, and for sure Walter and Hired was going to take plenty of pictures. They picked Lombard Street for their first stop. The boys meandered down Union Street through Chinatown, where they ate some real good Chinese food. At Fisherman's Wharf, the boys had an early supper of a smorgasbord of seafood. Walter and Jesse took to it like a duck to water, and Buster done some real damage to the lobster. He ate 6 of them. Hired ate a little light because fish didn't always sit well with him, so he just got some shrimp and steak. Well, touring Golden State Park, seeing court tire, buying doodads for the folks at the Embarcadero, and Jesse sci-filing in the financial district took up the rest of their time before they had to leave. The next train left out at 8:50 p.m. and arrived at 12:20 a.m., 27 hours of train riding. Plenty of time to catch up on sleep and any reading, letter writing, or business. The berths were nice size too, and the food was good too. Planning and a plotting time was aplenty for the boys on what they was going to do when they got back to the house. Well, whilst they was a-riding, Walter, Hired, and Jesse asked Buster just what he wanted to do. What he wanted out of life. Well, Buster said to the boy that they was his and family and best friends, and he hoped they got his and drift of his and thinking. Well, Jesse knowed about most of all of Buster's business and history, but Buster said it was pretty simple for him. He knowed he was blessed by the Lord with a good mind and a body, and all he really wanted was a place of his own and somebody that really cared for him. He always wanted to be around the boys and their families too, because he knowed like Hired they was going to marry up. Buster just hoped the gals was good uns and accepted all the boys and their families too. Money really wasn't the main thing in life for Buster. It was what he called affairs of the heart. Jesse lived for the law and business. Walter had the desire to drive and to succeed in whatever he done, and Hired wanted to tackle the hardest jobs he could and take on that challenge and come out on top. Buster told the boys he hoped that answered their question. The boys rolled into Vancouver right after midnight and went to their hotel. Tomorrow was a new day. 12th stop, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The boys got a room at the Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel for 2 nights before they left out to Banff. More picture taking and sightseeing was in order, and of course something good to eat. The boys visited the Vancouver Maritime Museum, Playland at the Pacific National Exhibition, the Vancouver Art Gallery, the H.R. McMillan Space Center, Vancouver Aquarium, and took a harbor boat tour to boot. Vancouver is surrounded by water on 3 sides and nestled alongside the coast and mountain range. Vancouver is the largest city in the province of British Columbia, with over 500,000 residents, and has one of the mildest climates in Canada. Vancouver is home to a spectacular natural scenery and bustling metropolitan core, business and whatnot. It was on to Sin restaurant for some fine Italian eating, a little store to Old McBrayer for a nightcap, and off to bed. Train leaves at 7:30 a.m. for Banff. 13th stop, Banff, Canada. Well, Buster just had to bring out the information on this part of their trip. The brochure had this to tell them about what they was being offered in the last leg of their vacation. When the boys arrived at Banff National Park, they checked into the Fairmont Chateau Hotel. Now, this place was something else, I'm here to tell you. Walter and Hired sure enough began to taking pictures right off the bat. Jesse just couldn't sit still and had to walk around and gom a bit. Buster took care of the checking in and getting a tour in a car. Excuse me, folks. The boys all agreed it was the thing to do to spend the night. Walter and Hired must have more than 100 rolls of film by now, and with all the picture taking they done, and that's a piece. The boys had so much they wanted to do that they extended their stay for a whole week. The wine and food festival was going on at that time, and Jesse dearly loved a glass of wine or two. Buster took care of the eating, and Walter was right behind him. Hired was goggle-eyed over the whole dang place and said he'd be hornswoggled if he didn't take Alma May there for their honeymoon next year. Well, there was all kinds of places to ski, snowmobile, fish, and just do about anything a body could imagine. Now, after they was all wore down from all this here activity, Buster got all of them into a hot tub and then a massage. Now, if that wasn't right, you would figure Walter would be the one to balk, but it was Buster. He was right skittish about having some woman rubbing on his body parts, and then wasn't nobody around his begonias. Well, I just grinned, and Jesse just shook his and hayed. Well, it was finally time to head for home. Well, Buster, Jesse, Walter, and Hired had a really fine supper there at the hotel before they left out the next morning. They shared lots of good times over the years and knowed their so-called coming of age meant things were a-changing. Life was changed, but that didn't mean you couldn't keep some of the things in the past that was really important. The friendship of the boys have had over the years was one that would last for a lifetime. They had all made a pact to always be there for each other no matter what. There was still some transition time before they all went separate ways and started families, and they intended to make the most of it. Well, Walter allowed him and Lou Ann was going to marry up too, and Jesse was sure enough in a pickle with at least 3 gals, and Buster was on the lookout for one himself but still playing the field. In another year it wouldn't be quite the same, and they all knowed it. But till then they had things to do and places to go. Well, sir, the new day tomorrow with new adventures and new story. The flight home was uneventful, and the folks all said the boys was a sight for sore eyes when they come in. All the boys and their folks gathered up, and the boys rehashed their trip. Pictures was passed around, and Walter and Howard said they was going to make copies for each one of them and have them put in an album. Mr. Ollinger said there had been a call from Mr. Holmes, and him and Dalton and Devane, along with Uncle Jeff, was coming for supper one day next month. There was a letter and 4 brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycles awaiting in the yard when the boys got back, and it was from Elphys. He said he overheard that the boys wanted to get theirselves one apiece, and he figured he'd help out a bit. He said to please accept his gift to him, 'cause that cream done the trick for him, and he ain't never had nor heard of nothing like it. Them motorcycles had each of the boys' name painted right on the gas tank. They was sure a pretty machine, I tell you. Well, right off the bat, Jesse had the other boys to meet up with him the next morning, and after they got on home. He done had in his and Hay how to make that natural concoction of his and cream, and that neem tree and some other extracts from some plants to keep the bugs and other pests from ruining crops. Well, they all went over to the chemistry teacher's house and asked Mr. Pugsley if he wouldn't mind helping them out a bit over at the schoolhouse in the lab. Well, he reckoned so, and since he had the keys, they went right on over, since he wasn't busy. Well, Jesse explained to him just what he was trying to do, and Mr. Pugsley knew right off that he needed a catalyst. When they got set up and things were brewing, Mr. Pugsley offered up some advice on some different things to try. Well, you would think this was going to be a long process. Wrong. The idea to put a little camphor and castor oil did the trick after a few tries. The camphor sure enough was noticeable, and the castor oil made the concoction stick to the plant and leaves like glue and wasn't going to wash right off neither. The next thing was to try it out. Well, Howard got a spray bottle and squirted it on the potted plant Mrs. Bennett had on her desk in the room where she taught Latin. Now, Mr. Pugsley went to Mr. Jack Larrabee's agri department, where he noticed some bugs he had in there and got some. He let them out on the plant, and boy, howdy did they skedaddle. Even killed one or two of them. Well, Jesse told them all that what we got is we got it, and began to grin like a possum eating green persimmon. First off, he called Docca and let him know they done got something he thought would help out their situation with the crops. Well, Jesse told Docca they would get right on production after a few more tests, but he was sure it would work. Next thing Jesse done was to get Lamar Green on the phone to protect the concoction with the patent. Jesse give it the name of Four Winds after all the boys, and the company name of Four Winds Chemicals. The next thing that had to be done was to get that dissipating ray gizmo to working so they could apply the Four Winds to crops in the field. Sprayers on tractors, flying it in with crop dusters, or just plain hand spraying would work for application, but if you didn't get the Four Winds where it would spray and cover a wide area, it just wasn't going to be applied to crops, leastways not economically. Well, Jesse and the boys knowed a feller or two in the underground scientific movement that experimented in alternative methods of science. Buck Rogers stuff. Well, Jesse made the call and asked for some help. Mr. Lund and Mr. Cullen said they thought that with a couple of tries and applying Four Winds, they just might have the ticket for Jesse's idea to work. They had been experimenting with something of that nature and would give it a whirl. They had something all on the back burner. They said they would call back as soon as they tried it on out. Well, sir, they did in about a week. It was good news. Mr. Lund said they used some rife technology from the 30s and Tesla's theories, and they matched up pretty darn good with their existing equipment and could make it work just fine. Frequency was the key. Hooking up a battery-powered light that was charged by an alternator would provide the power to run the light and frequency machine that could be installed in a tank. Conventional spraying could be done with the unit about the size of a backpack. Problem solved. Well, Jesse also got Lamar Green to handle that too. Mr. Lund and Mr. Cullen were sharing the profits from their machine that would be packaged with the Four Winds chemical. Well, Buster told Jesse that all he needed was a little trip to get his mind right, and now he seen how it all come together. Plus, he had a lot of fun. Jesse had to admit that. Buster was right, and to tell the truth, he wouldn't have changed a thing for nothing in the world. The boys all got him an RC and a moon pie. Buster got 4 of them, and sit under a sweet gum tree down on the bayou and just reflected on what all took place in the last 2 months. Buster said Lulu was a Yankee, but he sure enough fancied that gal. All the boys turned wall-eyed to Buster and said, "You don't mean it." Well, Jesse said, "Now take her slow and see how all that worked out." Seemed to him that Lulu probably wasn't going to fit in right, but at first it all depended on what both of them wanted to do. Time would tell, he said. Just wasn't that serious right then, and she had her design school to finish first. Well, Jesse said he was writing Monique a long letter. That's all he said, just writing her a long letter. Jesse would tell the boys what all was in it and what was on his mind when he took the notion. There was a big party Saturday night for just the boys and the gals and their folks as well as the boys' folks. That was a house full for sure. The Ollinger gals with their beaux and Walter's 2 brothers and their wives would be there for darn tootin'. They sure didn't never miss a gathering, that's for sure. Well, Jesse was going to be in law school soon, and the boys know time was a precious commodity nowadays, but the perfume had to be developed, and Mr. Holmes sure had something on his mind. Aunt Judith called, and Elizabeth was going to take another trip soon and asked if one of the Ollinger gals wanted to come up and stay for a spell. They said they might for a week or 2, but Buster's grandma was definitely going to go, and if she went, Grandpa Gus would too. Buster would be on his own for a spell, and he reckoned, and that meant he was sure enough going to be at the Ollinger and McBrayer dinner table a lot. Well, Jesse said he was going to try to get the perfume made up as soon as he could, and might have Mr. Pugsley or Mr. Lund and Mr. Cullen help him out, as time wasn't something he was going to have a lot of in law school. The night of the party, Walter and Lou Ann come riding up on Walter's 2 grays, Smoky and Stony, for a moonlight ride. A hired brung Alma May on his new Harley Davidson Elvis Presley gave him, and was as proud as Punch over that. Jesse and Buster come in Buster's Ford, and they was going to leave after the party in the Queen for Montgomery for the day. Jesse had something on his mind about Denise, it appeared. Buster said he'd see how all that turned out when they got there. Well, colors was a-changing, just a mite fresh in the evening now. First snow wasn't going to be fur off. Hogs needed to be brought in, dressed out, and hung in the smokehouse. Canning was about all done, excepting for some fruit and taters that had to be dug up and put in the root cellar. Life was good, and the call of the Bob White and Whippoorwill was music to your ear as Red Foley began to sing Down in the Valley. Hope you folks enjoyed What You Thinkin'. The boys is off to another adventure. Y'all have a blessed day now.